Thanks, Ev. Enjoyed that. We're looking forward to that little spot for the next this series that we're doing. We're looking at the foundations of the church, East End Church. What it is that makes us unique as East End Church. So each week, Ev will be interviewing different people within the church with different aspects of the foundations that we have sort of laid in this church. And today I want to look at that whole sense, and I'm not going to go on for very long. I'm aware that we've chatted quite a bit, but I want us to look at that whole sense of on a mission. So East End Church is a church on a mission, and if you've got a Bible with you, you might want to turn to Isaiah 6. I'm going to read the first 8 verses, and they're going to come up on the screen anyway. But he says this, he says, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim, each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the foundations of the thresholds shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, Woe to me, for I am lost, for I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he'd taken with tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth and said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sin atoned for. When I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? Then I said, Here I am, send me." People over the years have said I look like different people. Some of them are flattering, some of them are very much not. Okay, and I've had all sorts. I've had Ricky Butcher. What is it? Yeah, Ricky Butcher. I've had Jimmy Nail. I've had various football pundits. I've had Marty Pello, that was one. Oh, Aragorn, you know, the one in Lord of the Rings. I've had that. But most of all, people say, you look like Jesus. And that's all right. But how do they know? I've never seen a photo of Jesus. We've got some artist's impressions from the Middle Ages. And I understand, yeah, it's the long hair, and especially towards the end of the week, I don't tend to shave every, it's Monday, whether I need it or not, I will shave. And I can see why people say that. But from a biblical point of view, how do they know what he looks like? Because when anyone catches even a glimpse of him, they fall flat on their face. And what we get in the Bible is accounts of things that surround Jesus. They're not like what he looks like. They describe things like the train of his robe filling the temple. They talk about his feet being like burnished bronze, and they talk about the back of his head. And they talk about this stuff because they are just, you can sort of imagine them on the floor just peeking through their hands, because when they see him, they are totally, completely undone. And you know, as each of the guys that sort of serve as elders in the church have said, there's been moments in our life when we have, it's like we've had a momentary glance of him, and that has utterly humbled and undone us so that we can never be the same again. And we see that in the Bible, that when he speaks, when he reveals himself, even inanimate objects, they rightly tremble. We see storms cease. We see fish spontaneously multiply. We see graves giving up their occupants as he takes centre stage. Things cannot stay the same when Jesus arrives. And in those verses that I was just reading, verse 8, I'm going to repeat that. Verse 8 says this, it says, "And I heard a voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, here I am, send me." You see, when you realise that your guilt is taken away, when you realise that your shame no longer belongs to you, you know, like when Isaiah, this prophet, this man of God, when he got this glimpse of the Lord, he just suddenly become terribly aware of the fact that he's every word that comes from his mouth was totally unclean and inappropriate in the presence of such holiness. But God made a way for him to be cleansed, to be purified. And the burning coal from the altar touched his lips, and he realised he was forgiven. When you know you're forgiven, when you know you have been captured and purified by a holy, holy, holy God, you volunteer for anything. Who will go, oh, yeah, go on, Jesus, I'll go for that. And we don't volunteer because we think we're the best or the most qualified or the most sort of trained to do it. We volunteer because we're available. And as men and women on a mission in East End Church, what we've got to offer is our availability. We know we're not the best. I know I'm not the most eloquent or educated, but I am around. I'm available. I'm willing. And one of our biggest qualifications as East End Church is that willingness to say, Lord, here I am. So, you know the raw material that I am. Send me. When your guilt and shame is taken away, you'll do anything. I remember back in 1980 when I was 10 years old, and I remember a news flash coming on the telly. And I remember it because it's probably one of the first things I remembered as a news flash and the significance of a news flash. And it was May the 5th, and there was these cameras on the Iranian embassy in London, and these SAS sort of soldiers were abseiling down the front of the building, and they came and released these hostages from the Iranian embassy. And I remember watching it, and what you had was this crack trained team on a mission together to rescue. And even as a small boy, I thought, I want to be part of the mission. I want to be part. I want some of that. And I feel that when I met Jesus and started following Jesus, and I realised that he had called me not just to, he didn't just clean me, but he's allowed me to represent him to a needy world. If you was to go to the doctors, right, with a spot on your foot, and you go there and the doctor examines the spot and he gets his magnifying glass out and then he sort of says, look, I'm sorry, we're going to have to remove your leg from the knee down. That the remedy says more about the problem than the symptoms. We see around the world, we see the pandemic virus, we see kind of political upheaval, we see, terrible sin and selfishness, we see injustice and hunger, we see a world that is so messed up, but they're just the symptoms. But the remedy that came was God's beloved Son came down to deal with it. It wasn't like, oh, let's send a really cool angel. It's like, it was so messed up that God himself had to leave his place of comfort to reach this sin-sick world. And when we follow his example, when we leave our relative comfort behind to rescue a dying generation. We do it not because it's like, oh, I've got to. It's like when we realise that the salvation that's been won for us, how can we not give everything? You know, and it may be that you've been born and bred here. You know, you can be born and bred in a place. When I was in Brighton and I got born again, I've got this sense of on a mission there in Brighton. And I would go out on the streets and preach, and I would tell everybody I possibly could meet about Jesus. And that's continued. So whether you are, you know, born in the sound of Bow Bells, or if you've come from the other side of the planet, we can get that sense of on a mission. We are commissioned by God to make a difference in on our watch, in our generation. And the truth is, how much of the East End, how much of the world can be won for Jesus? Well, I don't know. But why don't we together find out? Well, why don't we say, Lord, here we are, send us. There's different ways as a church that we are looking to do that. I think, you know, like we look to support ministries outside of ourselves, both nationally and internationally. We're looking at supporting various things in Africa. We're looking at various things as people from us have moved out and gone to other nations. We look for ways to support them financially and prayerfully. We wanted to do that, but we want to be thinking globally, but acting locally. So whether we are, you know, moving across hemispheres or whether we are moving across sofas, we are on a mission. East End Church is a church on a mission, and we want to volunteer for that great mission for God. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to hand back to Ev, who's going to wrap it up for us. Jesus, we're just delighted that you would choose people like us. And in no sense do we think that we are the finished article or crack troops or whatever. We come before you in our frailty, but with our willingness, and say, Lord, here we are. Send us. We want to reach this generation for Jesus. We recognise that politics ain't going to do it. Education or finance is not going to do it. It's a move of God. It's your gospel that changes lives. And Lord, I pray that you would help each and every one of us to live in a way that gets that multitude around the throne that Fraser was quoting earlier. We love you, Lord. Amen.